Hey everyone, welcome back. I know a lot of us are trying to make sense of what's going on with prices these days, right? It feels like everything is more expensive, and there's all this talk about what's driving it and what we can do about it.
Yeah, no kidding, right.
So today we're going to dive into one specific claim that's been making the rounds. The idea that we can lower prices, across the board by just ramping up domestic oil and gas production.
Okay.
So we're going to try to figure out if that really holds water.
All right. Sounds good. I'm ready to jump in.
Great. So basically, the argument we're looking at today is that if we just produce more oil and gas here in the U.S., everything from groceries to, just about everything else will become more affordable.
Right, because the thinking is that high energy costs are sort of the root cause of higher prices for everything else, transportation, manufacturing, you name it.
Exactly. And we found this really interesting YouTube video from the Ring of Fire. It's called Trump's plan to lower prices just blew up in his face.
Oh, interesting title.
Yeah, and it really gets into this whole idea. So, Donald Trump has been pretty vocal about this, saying his plan to lower prices involves what he calls unleashing all the drilling.
Right, I've heard him say that.
But here's the thing, and the video really highlights this, that direct link between more drilling and cheaper groceries. Well, it might not be as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty intuitive at first glance, like higher fuel costs, higher transportation costs. So if we produce more oil here, prices should go down, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the video actually kind of flat out refutes that. They say, and they bring in some economists to back this up, that it's not a one-to-one relationship.
Huh. Okay.
There are so many other factors that go into how much things cost. Energy is definitely a big one, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle.
Right. That makes sense.
So that's a really important point to start with, because the video then goes on to look at what the people who would actually be doing all this drilling are saying. And it gets pretty interesting because it doesn't seem like they're all on board with this drill more, prices drop idea.
Really? So who are they talking about?
Well, first they talk about Saudi Arabia, obviously a huge player in the global oil market, right? And a big part of OPEC.
Right, of course.
So what they do has a huge impact on oil prices worldwide. And according to the video, it sounds like Saudi Arabia, they're not exactly jumping at the chance to increase production.
I wonder why.
Well, from what they say in the video, it seems like it all boils down to money.
Okay, how so?
So apparently, and they cite the International Monetary Fund for this, Saudi Arabia needs oil prices to be around $90 a barrel just to break even, to balance their budget.
Oh, wow. So they need a pretty high price to stay in the black.
Yeah. And at the time this video was made, oil was only going for something like $72 a barrel. So they were already running in the red. And think about it. If they increase production, that's just going to push prices down even further.
Yeah, that's not going to help their bottom line.
Exactly. So from their perspective, it makes more sense to keep production where it is or even try to decrease it to push prices up.
Yeah, so that already throws a wrench in this whole drill more, prices drop plan if one of the biggest producers in the world doesn't even want to drill more.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated when you look at what's happening here in the U.S. Because remember, Trump specifically talked about unleashing the frackers. So you'd think those companies would be all for increasing production, right?
Yeah, you'd think they'd be excited about that.
But the video points out something really important, that the U.S. fracking industry learned a hard lesson a few years back around 2020, actually during Trump's first term.
Okay, what happened?
Well, there was this big push to increase fracking, and it actually led to way too much oil, like a massive oversupply.
So it's like a classic case of supply and demand, right? Too much supply, not enough demand to match.
Exactly. And it actually caused a huge downturn in the industry. A lot of fracking companies went belly up. They went bankrupt.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like they kind of fracked themselves to death by overproducing.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. They really learned that just focusing on producing as much oil as possible without thinking about the market and the financial side of things, well, it can backfire big time.
So basically they got burned by putting production ahead of financial stability.
Exactly. And it seems like that experience has really changed their approach. Now, according to this video, they're prioritizing making sure their businesses are stable and profitable instead of just going all out on production, even if there are changes to regulations or whatever.
So they're being more cautious now, not just blindly chasing production numbers.
Exactly. And here's another thought. Even if the U.S. did manage to increase production a lot, wouldn't Saudi Arabia's position kind of counteract that? Like, they could just adjust their own production to keep prices where they want them.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like they have their own agenda, and it doesn't necessarily line up with this simple drill more prices drop strategy.
Yeah. Right. It's way more complicated than that. And now with the U.S. fracking companies also hesitant to just ramp up production, it really throws a wrench in the whole plan, doesn't it?
It definitely does. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about the two main groups that would have to make this happen, and
Yeah.
they're both basically saying, nah, we're good.
Yeah. And they're doing it for their own financial reasons because of their past experiences. And that leads us to the big question that the video asks. If this unleash the drilling thing isn't going to work, what's the alternative? What other options are there to deal with these rising prices?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Hmm.
If the plan relies on actions that the key players just aren't willing to take, then what? Is there something else they have in mind? Or maybe they just don't fully understand how these energy markets work and how they affect prices in general.
Right. So to sum up our little deep dive here, this idea that just producing more oil and gas will automatically make everything cheaper for everyone, it might sound good at first, but it faces some serious challenges.
Yeah, it's definitely more complicated than it might appear.
You've got Saudi Arabia wanting higher prices, not lower, and U.S. fracking companies who are now super cautious about overproduction. They're all about making sure their businesses are stable and profitable, and that really undermines the whole plan, right?
It does. I mean, we set out to look at this plan for the perspective of the oil and gas industry itself. And what we found, at least according to this video, is that the people who would actually be responsible for making it happen, well, they're not really on board.
And that brings us to a pretty thought-provoking question for all of you listening. If increasing production isn't the answer, what other factors do you think are really driving prices up? And what kind of policies could actually work? What would it take to get these different players, the producers, the consumers, the governments, everyone involved, to actually work together on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we all need to think about.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. And that's why we love diving into these topics with you all. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
That was good.